Good morning. Today we are going to start the second part of our third chapter, Simple Nutrients into Cell. Last class we have studied about the structure of the heart and the parts of the heart and then different types of blood vessels. All these things we have studied in the last class. And about the pressure, systolic pressure, diastolic pressure, and all these things we have studied in the last class. Now, we are going to study about next topic, that is the lymph. We all know that in our body, the circulating fluid is blood. So, other than blood, there's one more fluid present in circulating fluid present in our body, that is the lymph. Okay, the lymph is formed from the blood itself. How lymph is formed? That I will tell you, explain you. That is, lymph, when the blood flows through the blood vessels, when it flows through the capillaries, and we have studied about the structure of the capillaries. We have studied that on the walls of the capillaries, pores are present, is it? So when the blood flows through the capillaries, through the pores of the capillaries, the plasma in the blood oozes into the intercellular spaces of the cells. Okay. Once more, I will tell you, when this blood flows through the blood vessel capillary, the capillary consists of pores on the walls. So when this blood flows through the capillary, you know that the two parts of the blood, that is plasma and blood cells. The plasma oozes out through the pores on the capillary wall into the intercellular spaces of the cell, the space in between the cells, okay, intercellular spaces of a cell. When this plasma oozes into the intercellular spaces of the cell, it is called as the tissue fluid. Okay, when the plasma oozes into the intercellular spaces of the cell, and that means goes out, oozes means goes out into the intercellular space of the cell, it is called as the tissue fluid. And you all know that a group of similar cells performing a specific function forms the tissue. So a group of cells, in between this group of cells, some space will be there. That is the intercellular space. So when this blood flows through the capillary, the pores on the there are pores on the capillary. Through these pores, what oozes out, the plasma and the blood oozes into this intercellular space. Okay, and then when the plasma oozes into the intercellular space, it is called as the tissue fluid. And the exchange of the nutrients and the waste materials takes place between this tissue fluid and the cell. Okay, and this exchange is taking place between the tissue fluid and the cell. And this tissue fluid is absorbed or enters into the blood and the lymph duct. The tissue fluid that entered to the lymph duct is called as the lymph. Okay, so what is tissue fluid? Tissue fluid is the plasma that oozes out through the pores of the capillary into the intercellular spaces of the cell. And that tissue fluid is absorbed into the lymph duct and blood. And the lymph duct, the tissue fluid inside the lymph duct is called as the what? Lymph. Is it clear for you? So lymph is formed from the blood and it is reabsorbed and then reabsorbed into the blood itself. It is reaching through the lymph duct. It finally reaches the blood in the near the heart. Okay, and not only the blood vessels and not only the blood, but the lymph also plays an important role in the transport of nutrients. You are studying in our second chapter and while studying about the structure of the microvilli. And that we have seen that around the microvilli, what is present, numerous number of blood capillaries and lymph ducts are present, and the lymph capillaries are present. And this lymph capillaries absorb or lymph duct absorb what? Fatty acid and glycerol absorption is taken place by the lacteal or the lymph capillaries. Is it clear for you? So the lacteal or the lymph capillaries absorb the fatty acid and glycerol. So the transport of this fatty acid and glycerol to the cells take place with the help of the lymph. Is it clear for you? So not only the blood, but also the lymph also plays an important role in the transport of the materials. Is it clear for you? So once more I'll explain what is lymph for you. Lymph is the plasma that oozes out from the capillary walls into the intercellular spaces. Okay, so when the blood flows through the blood vessel, or when the blood flows through the capillary, capillary is the blood vessel. Okay, blood capillaries. Through the pores of the blood capillaries, the plasma in the blood oozes into the intercellular spaces. When this plasma reaches the intercellular spaces, it is called as the tissue fluid. This tissue fluid helps in the exchange of materials between the cell and the tissue fluid, or between the cell and the blood. Is it clear for you? So this tissue fluid is then absorbed by the blood and the lymph duct. When this tissue fluid reaches the lymph duct, it is called as the. Is it clear for you? So lymph is formed from the blood, and it is again reaching the blood itself. Okay, now the lymphatic system, lymph is formed from blood and passes through the lymph duct and reaches and returns to blood near the heart. And the lymphatic system consists of lymph capillaries, lymph nodes, and lymph ducts and spleen. Okay, so lymphatic system consists of lymph capillaries, lymph ducts, lymph nodes, and spleen. Okay, then lymph nodes and spleen helps in defending disease-causing germs. Okay, so as we have studied about the circulatory system, respiratory system, like that, lymphatic system is present. Okay, and this lymphatic system consists of the lymph capillaries, lymph ducts, lymph nodes, and spleen. And the spleen is the largest organ in that system, and the spleen and the lymph nodes helps in defending the disease-causing germs, or they will kill the disease-causing germs. Is it clear for you? Now we can see about the formation of lymph and how the exchange of materials between the intercellular fluid and the lymph. Yes. Here you can see tissue fluid. You can see in the lower part of this picture, you can see the tissue fluid to the intercellular space and the exchange of materials between the cell and tissue fluid. Yes, tissue fluid to the intercellular space. In that exchange of materials, you can see from the blood, what is given to the tissue fluid. You can see an arrow, glucose and oxygen from the blood is moving to the tissue fluid, and from the tissue fluid it is moving to the cell. Okay, and red blood cells. Another thing is this tissue fluid does not consist of red blood cells, and large protein molecules are absent in the tissue fluid. Okay, then waste from the cell and the carbon dioxide and waste from the cell is oozing to the tissue fluid. You can see a space between the blood vessel and the cell, and you can see a space that is the intercellular space. Into that intercellular space, what is oozing out? Plasma is oozing out, and that plasma, when oozes out to the intercellular space, it is called as the tissue fluid, and that tissue fluid helps in the exchange of materials between the blood vessel and the cell. Okay, so from the blood, the glucose and oxygen is moving to the tissue fluid. That is, glucose and oxygen is moving to the tissue fluid, and from the tissue fluid it moves to the cell. From the cell, waste and carbon dioxide. From the cell, the waste and the carbon dioxide is moving to the blood capillaries and the blood, and from the it again moves to the from the blood it is transported to the waste removal parts of the body. Okay, so this is the exchange between the tissue fluid and the exchange between tissue fluid and the cells. Is it clear for you? So the tissue fluid what is tissue fluid is you have to keep in mind is tissue fluid is the plasma that oozes out through the pores of the capillaries. Okay, and that tissue fluid when enters to the lymph duct is called as the lymph. Is it clear for you? What is lymph and what is how the exchange of materials between the tissue fluid and the blood and the tissue fluid and the cells. Okay, from the blood the glucose and oxygen is diffuses into the tissue fluid and from tissue fluid to cell. Then from the cell, in return from the cell, what is waste materials and carbon dioxide is moving to the tissue fluid. And from tissue fluid, it is moving to the blood, and through the blood, it is taken to the excretory parts in order to remove the waste from our body. And carbon dioxide is taken to the lungs, and from the lungs, it is given outside. Carbon dioxide is given outside. It's clear for you. So, this is how lymph helps in the transport of fatty acid and glycerol, and this is how the lymph is formed, and all these things we have discussed now. Next we are going to discuss about the disease that is affecting the heart. And you all know that the importance of exercise in our daily life, is it? Exercise is very important. It plays a major role in the maintenance of our health, is it? And when we are eating the food in excess, if it contains the oil, amount of oil, fatty content in more, fatty content more in our food, and we are not doing any exercise, it's result in the deposition of fat in the arteries. When this fat is deposited in the walls of the inner walls of the arteries, it reduces the diameter of the artery, and artery is a blood vessel, and when it reduces the diameter of the arteries, what happens? The blood flow, and there is difficulty to flow of the blood through the arteries. Okay, so when we are taking intake of excess amount of fat, result in the disease called the arteriosclerosis. So arteriosclerosis is the consumption of caused by the consumption of excess fat, and this fat will be deposited in the inner walls of the artery, and it reduces the inner diameter of the artery. And what happens when the fat is deposited in the inner walls of the artery? It loses, the walls loses the elasticity and may rupture. Elasticity, the walls of the artery lose its elasticity, and there is a chance for rupture of the artery, and walls become rough. The walls of the artery become rough. Okay. Then, hence, at that time, what happens? The RBCs, the red blood cells, clump together. That is, they unite together and form the blood clot in the coronary vessels. And when a blood clot appears in the coronary vessels, it obstructs the flow of the blood to the heart, and this results in this may lead to the heart attack. Is it clear for you? So, excess intake of fat results in the deposition of fat in the arterial walls, and this reduces the diameter of the arterial walls and loses its elasticity, and it makes the inner walls of the arteries rough. And this disease condition is known as the arteriosclerosis. And this arteriosclerosis is a condition in which what happens? There is a rupture. It causes the rupture of the artery, and internal bleeding may be occurring, and it also clumps the RBCs. When it clumps the RBCs, a blood clot will be formed, and this blood clot obstructs the flow of the blood to the heart. When the blood flow of the heart to the flow of the blood to the heart is obstructed, what happens? It may result into the heart attack. Is it clear for you? So consumption of excess fat, and without exercise, without doing exercise, if we are consuming more fat that is not needed for our body, more than the amount needed for our body, if we are consuming the fat more than the amount needed for our body, it results in the deposition of fat in the arterial walls. Do you know what is artery? We have studied artery is a blood vessel. So in the inner walls of the artery, what happens? the fat is deposited in the inner walls of the artery. When the fat is deposited in the inner walls of the artery, it reduces the diameter, the area of to flow of the blood. And when it reduces the diameter and the area, not only it reduces the diameter of the arteries, the inner walls of the artery become rough and it loses the elasticity and there is a chance for rupture of the artery. And then what happens? Then another thing is, hence at that time what happens? The RBCs clump together to form the blood clot. When a blood clot is formed in the arteries, it obstructs the flow of the blood through the arteries and there's a chance for the heart attack. So this is the disease arteriosclerosis and it is caused by the consumption of excess fat. I think it's clear for you about the disease arteriosclerosis. Now we have studied about in this chapter from the first part onwards we are studying the transport of the blood and the lymph and the circulatory system of the human beings. Likewise, how the nutrients and the waste is transported through the in the human beings. It's through the blood, and the lymph also helps in the transportation. Likewise, in the plants, there is a transport system that is vascular tissues. We have studied about the vascular tissues in detail in the 8th standard, is it? Which are the vascular tissues you have studied? The vascular tissues are xylem and phloem, is it? Xylem helps in the transport of water from the root to different parts of the plant or to the leaves. And at the same time, phloem helps in the transport of food that is prepared in the leaves to different part of the plant, is it? So once more I will tell you the transportation of the water and the food that is taking place in the plant with the help of two vascular tissues, that is xylem and phloem. Xylem transport the water from the root to different part of the plant or the leaf. Or phloem transport the food that is prepared in the leaf to different part of the plant, is it? And xylem consists of two kinds of cells, that is xylem vessels and xylem tracheids. These xylem vessels and xylem tracheids are dead cells. Okay, so these dead cells helps in the transportation of water. And xylem vessels, the diameter of the xylem vessels is greater than that of the diameter of the xylem tracheids. Okay, and the xylem vessels are arranged one above the other. Like when the cells in between these xylem vessels disintegrate or disappears, it look like a long pipe. So the arrangement of the xylem vessels is like a long pipe, and the transportation of water is taking place through these xylem vessels and tracheids. Both these xylem vessels and tracheids are dead cells. Is it clear for you? Then about the transportation of the water, that is from the root to the tip of the plant or to the leaf. It is transported through the help of xylem. Then about transpiration. Have you heard about the term transpiration? In order to prove transpiration, we can arrange an experiment. That is, take two potted plants, one with leaves and one with the other without leaves. Okay, so take two potted plant, a potted plant with leaves and the other potted plant without leaves. Cover the both potted plant with a polythene bag. Okay, so we are covering both the potted plant with a polythene bag, and we are placing this both potted plant in the presence of the sunlight. So what happens after hours? Well, you can see that the potted plant, which is having leaves, which is covered with a polythene bag, you can see the droplets of water on that polythene bag of the potted plant with leaves. At the same time, if you are observing the potted plant without leaves, which is covered with the polythene sheet, you cannot see any water droplets there. There is the presence of water will not be there in the polythene sheet bag that is covered on the potted plant, which without leaves. So what this prove? Potted plant with the leaves having water droplets on the polythene bag, and the potted plant without leaves will not have any water droplets on the polythene bag which is covered on it. So what it proves? It proves that water is lost through the stomata through evaporation. And so the water lost through stomata through evaporation, that is present on the polythene bag of the potted plant with the leaves. And that process is known as transpiration. So the loss of water through the stomata by evaporation is called as the transpiration. Okay, so if we are taking two potted plant, one with leaves and the other without leaves, if we are covering it using a polythene bag, the potted plant with the leaves will expel water through the stomata, and that will be formed on the water droplets can be seen on the polythene bag which is covering the potted plant with the leaves. And the other potted plant without leaves, we are covering it using a polythene bag, and as it does not consist of any leaves, water is not expelled out from that plant, and we cannot see any water droplets on that polythene bag. Is it clear for you? So that is transpiration. And when this transpiration happens, when this water is lost from the leaves, there occurs a low pressure in the cells of the leaves. When there occurs a low pressure in the cells, in order to compensate the pressure and this pressure difference, the water from the adjacent cell will move to the move to this cell. From the adjacent cell means a nearby cell. So from the nearby cell, the water will move to this cell from where the water is lost. So this is known as the transpiration pool. So this transpiration pool helps in the transport of water from the bottom to the top of the plant. Not only this transpiration pool, other forces helping for the transport of water from the root to the top is water cohesion, adhesion. Cohesion means the water has the molecules as the capacity to stick together. That is the cohesion. And adhesion is the water molecules has the capacity to stick with the walls of the vessels through which it is transported. That is adhesion. So with the help of cohesion and adhesion and root pressure, osmosis, and with the help of osmosis, that is with the help of osmosis, the water is moved from one cell to other. Or provide all these forces, what happens? Water is transported from bottom to the top of the plant. Then about phloem, phloem consists of the sieve tube and the companion cells. Sieve tube, sieve means in Malayalam we can say deligus, aripa. What you can see on the sieve, so many pores you can see on the sieve. Like that, in phloem, in the sieve cells, in the cross section of the sieve cells, you can see so many pores on that. And through this pores, the cytoplasm of each cell is connected. And through this, the food in the form of sucrose is transported. Okay, so the sieve tubes and companion cells in the phloem helps in the transport of glucose in the form of sucrose to different part of the plant. Okay, now you can see a video that shows. Okay, thank you. I think today's class is clear for you. If you are having any doubt, you can clear it through the WhatsApp.